Hi, this is Britt. Just letting you know I'm here.
Okay, Britt, thanks for letting us know.
Hi, who is the phone number ending in 04?
This is James Walter.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. How's it going today? Can everybody hear me?
Yep. Yep, here.
Okay. All right. Is there any other? It looks like we have everybody here. Is there anybody else we're waiting on? And just a little note, Ben's tagged as James Walter on my screen here. James
Yeah.
All right. Well, if we're not waiting on anybody else, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 3:03 p.m. Let's see. Let's do a roll call real quick. We have Jessica Tuberty's here. James Walters here. Gene Smith is here. Jessica Dougherty Goodburn is here. Ryan is here. Did I miss anybody? Brett's here. And then one of the other people that is also here is Christopher. I'm sorry, I'm probably mangle your last name. Pesci. One of the candidates to fill in one of the open seats. So if you just want to say hi real quick, Christopher.
Hey everybody. Yeah, last name is correct. Pesci's spot on.
All right, thank you. Okay. The first item of business, according to our bylaws, the first item of business at the October meeting is to elect our board officers. Due to technical difficulties, I missed the last part of last month's meeting. It's my understanding that both Jessica and I have been nominated to reserve in our respective positions. I'm just wondering if we just need, maybe just a motion from someone on the board to let us continue on in that role, or however to do this. I'm just not 100% sure that we need to do like a voice vote, so it's just the two of us.
Yeah, Corey, I move that both you and Jessica Tuberty continue on or be reelected, if the term is right, as your respective positions.
All right. All in favor?
Right.
Aye.
Hi, this is Ryan. Hi.
Any opposed? Seeing no opposition, motion passes. Thanks for giving us another chance, folks.
You're doing a good job.
Okay, and next item is the minutes. Has everybody had an opportunity to look through the minutes to see if there needs to be any changes or corrections?
Yeah, Corey, just a quick note, and I'm sure it's my fault somehow. I've been, and the staff did a nice job of getting a bunch of things. When I went into the agenda, there was like 3 or 4 things that had little paper clips on them to open up. I was unable to open them up, and so I wasn't able to look at the minutes or a number of other things. So some kind of a glitch in my brain or something in the transmission or whatever. But anyhow, I have not been able to review the minutes, so I'll leave that to others.
Okay. All right. There's some way I could get this to you. I guess the only thing I can do is, ask if, if there's no changes other than what, Gene may see in the future. Perhaps we can correct that later, but as right now, are there any changes that need to be made? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and accept the minutes as approved. Oh, come on, man. I have too many things on my screens. There we go. Okay, the next item is general public comments. Any public comments attached to this meeting? Okay, apparently there aren't. Is there any board members who would like to make any non-agenda item comments? Go ahead, Jessica.
I would just wanted to ask who updates the website with the bike pedestrian board information, because it seems like it hasn't been updated in a while. And and there's like inconsistency a little bit between the bylaws and then the page about the meetings. And it just seems sort of like a housekeeping thing, but I'm not sure whose job it is. Is it my job? Is it to let someone know who does the tech for the city, or is it the board chair's job? Or
this is I see it all the time. I check on the website regularly, Jessica, and it is something that I brought to staff's attention. Whether what amount Ben and his staff have control over those website landings isn't really, I don't know if that's in their purview, but I have brought it to their attention, and I'm just waiting to see what happens from the city side on that.
okay.
Yeah, it would be helpful if you could make a list of changes that you'd want to see, and then I can work with admin staff on getting those made. I'll look through it. I haven't had time to go through that since Corey let me know. But yeah, it's something on our radar that has fallen easier through the cracks with no one in the office and all of us working remotely. It's not something that before we would kind of just chat in the hallway and like look over each other's shoulder and make changes, and now we'll have to kind of email suggestions to admin staff to help with that.
There's one little weird thing, it's probably been there forever. Simply the title, and it's on Ben's business cards too, it's Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Board, right? So we have an object, bicycle, and then a human, pedestrian. So it should really be Bicyclist Pedestrian Advisory Board. Otherwise, it would be Bicycle Shoe Advisory Board.
Gene, I think that's a really good point. I do think that that might require an act of council to officially change. I think that
I guess.
potentially that's worth taking up in your priorities for next year, is getting that change made at council and using it as an opportunity to talk about how we're talking about people and not objects at this board. We're talking about ways that people move around. So that it is a good point.
You mean to the city council?
City council, yep. Because it's in city code, it's established as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
Okay, anybody else have any other? Yeah, does anybody else have any other comments they'd like to make non-agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move ahead into comments from city staff. Ben, I'll let you decide your priority and how you want to handle this.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. I think I'm gonna do the 2 presentations, and then I will have some additional comments after that. And in the interest of Madison's time, I'm gonna ask that we switch up 7.2 and 7.3 and do the slow speeds presentation first. And if the board is amenable to that, do you think we can do that?
Any objections? Okay, seeing none, we'll just go ahead and go with that.
Okay, so I want to introduce this. Madison Matthias is an intern working in our office, jointly funded through my office and the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, who was working on a variety of projects. You saw a presentation from her last week on, or last month on wayfinding, and we look forward to bringing that back. But another element that she's working on is research around speed limits and the potential to reduce speed limits. This comes City Council, as part of the Title 12 updates that are moving through, asked staff to look into the possibility of reducing speed limits. So Madison has started doing the research of what does that mean? What does it look like elsewhere? What are some options available to us? And so as she's preparing the report, we thought it would be good to check in with the Bike Ped Board about some of the research that we're doing. And before we bring it through, bring the ideas through council for discussion there in the coming weeks. Without further ado, I guess I will introduce, I'll let Madison take it over and share screen, or I could do it if you prefer, Madison.
Awesome, thanks, Ben. I should be able to share my screen. Let me see. Beautiful, okay. Here we are, okay. So thank you, Ben, for that introduction, and everyone else for your time and your attention. My name is Madison Matthias, as he said. Actually, it's Matthias. And I'm an intern for the city's transportation planning team, and have been taking the time to explore Missoula's role in contributing to a national trend of not only high speeds, but the high fatality rates that follow. In this presentation, I will be covering the issues around speed. First, its national increases and consequences. Second, the context of what makes speeding so high risk. And third, I will cover speed-related crash history in Missoula, focusing specifically on our local non-collector, non-arterial roads, followed by Missoula-specific factors that exacerbate this issue. And finally, I will review different speed control tools as outlined by the National Association of City Transportation Officials City Limits Handbook, how they are intended, how others have used them, and how they fit here into Missoula. The various problems associated with speeding can be broken down for our purposes into 3 categories: increased risk, increased national trends, and warped perceptions around speeding. Put otherwise, those involved in a speed-related crash are at an increased risk of death and injury. The United States is seeing an independent and considerable uptick in speeding-related fatalities, and people's perceptions of speed are both scientifically and socially warped. What I mean by warped is that at higher speeds, a driver's field of vision naturally narrows, but socially speaking, speeding is rarely stigmatized. And with such astounding numbers of Americans speeding, the high risk and low reward nature of speeding appears to be disregarded. Nationally, more than 35,000 people die in traffic crashes every year, and millions more are seriously and often permanently injured. The United States has the highest fatality rate in the industrialized world, double the rate in Canada, and quadruple that in Europe. US streets are becoming especially dangerous for people that are walking and biking. Between 2009 and 2018, pedestrian deaths from traffic crashes in the US grew by 46%, reaching a nearly 3-decade high. This rate means that people walking and biking are an increasingly large percentage of all fatalities on the road. For the past 5 years, pedestrians and cyclists have accounted for almost 20% of all road fatalities, despite making up only 11% of road users. These tragedies are the result of a failed approach to traffic safety that prioritizes speed and convenience over human lives. To reiterate, the United States has the highest fatality rate in the industrialized world. Where other countries are seeing a decrease in their yearly traffic fatalities, the US is seeing a notable increase, leading responsible officials such as us to ask, what are we not noticing? And what are we not doing? The physics of speeding provide part of the answer. Higher speeds are more likely to result in crashes because of the amount of time a driver has to hit the brakes or swerve decreases at higher speeds. Well, vehicle braking distances increase. So, for example, a driver going 40 miles an hour will travel twice as far as a driver going 25 miles an hour before coming to a complete stop. Furthermore, research has shown that drivers have less peripheral awareness, that narrowed vision I was talking about, at higher speeds and are less likely to see or predict potential conflicts, such as people crossing the street or children playing. Speed is a central factor in traffic deaths. Vehicle speed and the associated force at the time of impact is directly correlated to whether a person will live or die. A person hit by a car traveling at 35 miles per hour is 5 times more likely to die than a person hit by a car traveling at 20 miles per hour. This graphic further illustrates my point. When hit by a car going 20 miles per hour, 1 in 10 of us will not survive the accident. This risk is calculated for the average able-bodied adult, while the risk of death for much younger, older pedestrians at any speed is considerably higher. Going forward, I will explore and explain causes and outcomes of speeding here in Missoula. To help you visualize, here is a map of injury-resulting crashes on Missoula's locally functionally classified roads from 2007 to 2018. And each red dot represents at least 1 life lost. The Missoula Community Transportation Safety Plan provides excellent current data around speed-related crashes in Missoula. It clearly outlines speed-related crashes as a factor in only 10% of all crashes, but 20% of fatalities, while showing us here at the city that a consistent third of speed-related crashes are happening on our 25-mile-an-hour local city-owned roads. Various Missoula-specific factors contribute to this issue. The first being our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. Missoula's residential roads are a heterogeneous mix of bicycle, pedestrian, and driving conditions. And in neighborhoods that are more rural or dominated by lower socioeconomic conditions, sidewalks are degraded or missing, which forces pedestrians onto the road and places them at risk. Secondly, the weather presents an ever-changing and often challenging driving condition. Often 43% of speeding driver crashes occur during weather such as rain, severe wind, fog, or snow. and 81% occurred on your wet, snowy, and icy road conditions. Sunlight, additionally, shining directly into the windshield or at low angles can create severe visibility issues for drivers. Third, in Missoula's edge of town communities, especially on newly developed land, the roads are wider, the trees are smaller, and the visibility is pretty expansive. And conditions like these don't push pedestrians on the roads, but instead create an environment in which cars feel more comfortable driving in excess of the posted speed limit. Fourth, Missoula's truck routes have often been disregarded by truckers who opt to cut through the neighborhood streets over using commercially designated routes. This increases the risk to bicyclists and pedestrians on local residential roads. Fifth, in Montana, teenagers are able to begin driving as early as 14 and a half years old. And unsurprisingly, speeding drivers tend to be younger. The Missoula Community Transportation Safety Plan found that almost 50% of drivers in speed-related crashes were younger than 25. And finally, Title 12 of Missoula's Municipal Code sets the required intersection visibility distance at 50 feet measured along the curb line of each intersecting street, or smaller yet, 15 feet along the curb line when intersecting with a primary collector or arterial. This means drivers can currently see only 50 feet of oncoming traffic just before they enter the intersection. When this 50-foot requirement is compared with the AASHTO Green Book's recommended intersection leg length, seen here for 25 miles an hour, there is a 65-foot discrepancy. The National Association of City Transportation Officials, the City Limits Handbook, published this past July, addresses this issue with 3 different speed reduction tools: default speed limits, slow zones, and corridor speed limits. Simply put, they are reductions of different scales, citywide, district-wide, and street-wide, that have some pretty significant differences. Default speed limits go citywide. It's a pretty inexpensive approach with an unless otherwise posted amendment in the local code, and the uniformity sets and maintains drivers' expectations citywide. In cities that have implemented it, such as London, Atlanta, Boston, Boulder, and Portland, notice a positive change. Slow zones are specific regions, senior centers, downtowns, schools, and parks, where slow speeds are prioritized for their high risk or their high conflict characteristics. Bozeman, Montana lowered speeds to 20 miles an hour near schools and parks, while Albuquerque designated their entire bicycle boulevard as a slow zone and set the speed limit at 18 miles per hour. Finally, corridor speed limits are probably the most common. They typically consist of a major street with conflict issues or speed complaints that receives a traffic and engineering survey or a speed study to determine if the complaint should be met with a policy or engineering change. Missoula's code and many others incorporate this as the pathway to change speed limits. The speed studies I referenced are not uniform or perfect. Traditionally, there has been a majority rules approach to setting speed limits, cutting reasonable speeds off at the 85th percentile, essentially just raising the speed limit to keep 85% of drivers within legal limits. Recently, the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices has recommended the US Limits 2 approach in conjunction with the Safe Systems approach, essentially accounting for the inevitable fact that people will make mistakes, speed, and be distracted. The reason that the percentile-based speed limit and speed studies have suddenly come out explicitly reminding us to contextualize the speed around human error and contextualize the way that we're setting our limits around human error is because the 85th percentile approach is completely devoid of this. Human behavior is constantly changing and is known to be irrational. This method forces engineers to adjust speed limits to match observed driver behavior instead of bringing driver behavior in line with safety goals and the law. When it comes to safety, this method is designed to fail. Percentile-based speed limit setting methods fail at keeping people safe because they set a permanently moving target based on current human behavior, not safety. So I found a great visualization of my point that percentile-based speed studies that raise speeds are cyclical, a positively reinforcing feedback loop. Again, showing a positive feedback loop of increased speeds with each consecutive percentile-based speed study. Now, here in Missoula, pulling all of this together, we see a pattern of speed-related crashes on both local roads and arterials, and we have a history of approaching these issues with corridor-based speed studies, with an option for slow zones near schools and senior centers. So with this context, what I want to ask you is, what do you think? Do you see a benefit in reducing speeds in Missoula, and where are you noticing these issues? Thank you.
Right, thanks, Madison. At this time, I'll go ahead and open up the questions for her. No?
Yeah, Corey?
Go ahead.
Oh, I gotta pull up my little hand raising thing. Anyhow, I can't find it. So yeah, first of all, Madison, really great presentation. You really covered it well. And I did look through the city limits document from NACTO, where a lot of this information came from. The one thing I would add is that with the advent of more SUVs as a ratio of vehicles on the road compared to sedans, the profile of the front of an SUV, and this I think fell into the Higgins collision from a couple months ago too. The front end of a SUV being more blunt means and higher means a pedestrian or a bicyclist is going to get pushed under the carriage of the vehicle rather than knocked off up onto the hood, as is more typical with the more lower and rounded nose of a sedan. Secondly, the larger SUVs and pickup trucks, etc. The larger the vehicle and the more newer with better suspension and more soundproofing, there is more of a natural tendency for that driver, especially if they're not looking at their speed limit, which a lot of us don't, they will naturally tend to sense that their speed is lower than it actually is when you have a larger vehicle with better soundproofing. So that factor also builds into the proclivity for people to go higher than speed limits. So I just wanted to put that into there. In terms of questions, I guess my question is, in terms of trying to set priorities for Missoula, are we better off trying to, if we do want to look at going with lower speeds, are we better off with adding the greenways and bicycle corridors to the mix of school zones and senior zones? Or do we think we're better off with just going to, like it looks like they did in Portland and I think somewhere in Colorado, a broader scope of residential streets in general, going to the what is commonly called the 20 is plenty plan or concept. So that would be my question, which I think we want to go a certain way to get speeds down. It's a matter of where and how extensively. So that's my question, is what are our options?
Gene, that's what we're asking you, is what do you prefer? The Greenway, like, Greenway network get a priority, or should we pursue blanket speed limit reductions? Or,
Well,
when
yeah,
we
personally,
start
I
having this
think
conversation with the attorney's office and council, where does the board think we should direct attention? Because anything is going to require some amount of code change to be able
right,
to.
and I guess where I'm coming from is it's not just the board, obviously, that's going to affect city council. So I'm trying to anticipate what the pushback might be if we went to more of an across the board residential approach. in terms of the, I guess you might say, the disruption of normal driving habits, which I think is a good thing. And maybe the cost of it and the public pushback.
I hate to interrupt, but I think if she stops screen sharing, then we can raise our hands and
Oh, yeah.
I think that's why that's gone. Maybe not.
Is it back?
I don't know. It didn't. I don't know why I can't raise my hand.
Yeah, somebody raise your hand and see what
Oh,
happens.
it's on, when you pull down your participants, it'll show the hand raising thing. At least on my iPad, it shows the hand raising thing at the bottom.
Oh, there they are. Okay, so,
Yeah, I just put mine up and taking it down again.
okay.
Right, Corey?
All right, now I see it. Thank you. And thanks for pointing that out. Now I can see who's wanting to talk and who's not. Okay, I don't know whose hands was first. Was it Jessica or Jesse? I'll just go with Jessica first.
Okay. Yeah, my question's related, but I do think that having a set 20-mile-per-hour speed limit on the greenways would be beneficial, just to further kind of designate those as a network. And I was curious what that might look like. Would it be signage at specific points, or I guess one of the benefits is that we wouldn't necessarily have to put signage everywhere, right?
Yeah. You want to take this, or do you?
Yeah, so I think that some of those details are what we'd have to figure out. Is could we do something like the cell phone ordinance where you have signs on the entrance to town that say unless otherwise posted, the speed limit is X, but it would, no matter what happens, changes would probably force a reevaluation of our sign inventory, and we would have to be strategic with where we put signs. I can't really say with certainty that one approach would result in more or fewer signs, but they certainly would probably look a little different than now. The hope would be that we, again, that's one of the things that makes a blanket approach easier, is that a lot of communities have done a less, unless otherwise posted, on like all freeway exits and major entrances to city limits.
One real quick question for staff. Do I have host privileges on this?
I can make you co-host.
Okay, thank you. I think that will be helpful too. Okay, Jesse.
Okay, well, thanks, Madison. I thought it was an awesome presentation. I like the infographics especially. I think that having the data and seeing the trends is super important. The American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement on pedestrian safety mirrors exactly what you presented. So when you're looking for allyship, I would look at the Pediatricians of America are all about reducing speeds because children perceive speed worse than adults. And so you mentioned that perception of speed is a problem for all people, but especially for small people. And so I think that it's always valuable when you're presenting an opinion to council, I think, to have other groups, national groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics, who are like, yes, we are also worried about this. I would be interested to hear from the police what their opinion of traffic enforcement would be, because as a mom and someone who walks a lot in town, I feel like having a default speed that's lower benefits everyone, and the signage is lower cost. And then as far as the police go, it would be interesting to hear from them. If we keep those special places, school zones, which I completely advocate for having them be, their own deal, but just having the default speed in neighborhoods on greenways be 20 seems like it's even more protective. And I would say if you're going to try to reduce fatalities, you would want to go like even more protective. But one of the other things that you mentioned, which I wanted to see if people would be on board with when we come up with what a recommendation to council might look like, is the need for more extended buffer zones at intersections for higher visibility. And so changing that striping or the painting on the, for no parking on places that where particularly on the greenways where people are moving more would be. So those are really the three key things would be like, do we need to recommend that the buffer zones be extended? Do we need the police input and collaboration? And then I would support having the default speed limit be 20 across the board, put it on all of our exits. But I would say that would be dependent upon the police traffic enforcement.
That's really thoughtful. Thank you. It was also very interesting to think about.
Okay, Gene?
Corey, may I speak briefly to one of Jesse's points?
Do you mind, Gene? Okay, go
Oh, that's
ahead.
fine. That's right.
So the Madison brought up the current discrepancy between what our site triangles are at intersections and what the national guidance suggests should be site triangles and intersections. And we're actually seeking to remedy that with the Title 12 updates that either have recently gone through council or will be coming through council soon. And we actually have received a comment from a member of the public about those, and was urging us to reconsider the longer site triangle of 115 feet. Because as this person pointed out, that if you can see further down the road, then you can go faster through the intersections. And I wrote back to this person and just explained a little bit of the staff reasoning about why we want to extend those, is because we want to extend our the regulations that are in place, because we feel like it gives us broader flexibility when we can't meet those. And so most of the intersections in our existing neighborhoods are, there's obstructions well within that 115 feet, not just the parked cars, but boulevard trees, utility poles, landscaping, fences, even houses are in the way of those, are blocking the view of those 115-foot site triangles. So by extending our regulations to 115 feet, we're not suggesting that we eliminate all of those obstacles and make these wide open freeways for people to cruise down. Instead, we point out that, gee, we can't meet the 25-mile-an-hour regulation for having this be uncontrolled. We need to look at doing something to reduce the speeds there, because it's not safe for people to be going 25 because they can't see that full 115 feet. And so again, rather than cut down the trees, it will give us more flexibility in potentially adding stop signs or traffic circles or some other lower speed limits or some other way of reducing speeds. So yeah, again, it's a little counterintuitive, but we think it's a good idea to increase the distance that we're telling you should have, because when we don't, then it gives us tools to address it.
All right, thank
Sorry.
you, Ben.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gene.
Oh, thanks. And I guess I'm wondering, Ben, with going from 50 to the 115 feet for 25 miles an hour, if I remember it correctly, from Madison's presentation. So if we're going to go with the overall 20 miles and 20 instead of 25 for residential, that sort of takes away, I guess what I'm saying is that might be a way to kind of get public support behind it, saying that if we can get the speeds lowered to 20, then there's less pressure to move those triangles as far as we would want to for 25 miles an hour, and therefore leave more parking spaces and less less pressure to have people change their fences and take out trees on boulevards, et cetera. So that seems to be another thumbs up, if you will, for going to the citywide 20-mile-an-hour residential. I have pushed for quite a while the idea that the intersection sightlines being blocked with vehicles, again, with the tendency of more people to have SUVs, the sightlines on a lot of intersections are less than ideal in terms of being able to drive at even the speed limit, not to mention a lot of people driving above it of 25 miles an hour and having a decent amount of time to see and react to people on cross streets. So that's my comment on that. Or I guess question. So Ben, is the idea behind going with the extended triangles, is that idea behind keeping it at 25? Or are we looking to do both, go to 20 and keep the triangles bigger too?
The extended triangles are, because this was drafted, you know, the Title 12 updates were drafted well before we're even considering any sort of speed limit changes. We had to go with existing laws, which are 25 miles an hour, which is why we're citing that. If speed limits were to change, we'd probably amend Title 12 to maybe just include the table based on how fast you're designing your road for.
All right, thanks, Gene and Ben. Ryan, you have a comment?
Yeah, hi. I guess when I raised my hand earlier, I think you guys maybe had already talked a little bit about this, but regarding that 115 feet, I guess I'm just curious if there has been any discussion about also actually removing parking where that's possible. You know, I like the idea of reducing the speed to accommodate the fact that we have a lot of reduced visibility and we can't functionally change it everywhere. But there are plenty of spots around town where it seems like we could easily dramatically improve it just by removing one parking spot. That's the closest one to a lot of the intersections, but that's reducing parking. But it seems like that would be one of the most effective ways of increasing that view corridor. And my second question was just as far as you talked about before as well regarding public buy-in. I'm just really curious if there's any discussion or there's any, I guess I should just say I'm curious about what law enforcement think about this. And is there conversations with them? They're the ones that are going to enforce this lower speed limit. How is that going to affect them? Would they like this? Would they see it as a thorn in their side? And if so, then how could we, just planning to have a conversation with them about what they think about doing it?
We do plan to have a conversation with law enforcement separately and as part of kind of the policy advising team of the administration, just to in the next couple of weeks before coming to council with this presentation, just to get their opinions on it. What the research shows, and this is mentioned at City Limits, is that there have been some studies that have shown that just decreasing the speed limit and the law and doing nothing else with enforcement or signage actually does reduce overall average speeds around town, because the majority of people want to obey the law. And so while there is certainly an enforcement and education component of any changes that would be made, it's unclear exactly how vigorous that needs to be from an enforcement perspective. And so we'll work with police and the attorney's office on what that could look like.
Okay. All right, Jessica, you had a comment? Question?
Yes. So this is maybe jumping ahead to making recommendation to council, but one argument for 20-mile-per-hour speed limits is the cultural aspect. Like when you think about Portland or Boulder or places who have implemented this, those are very bicycle friendly communities. And we already have a lot of things in place, like our ambitious mode split goals and the complete streets. And we're a gold level bike community, bicycle friendly community through the League of American Bicyclists. And so I think that this is just another signal, which is significant and important for new people coming to our city and for everyone biking around, that this is important and it's something that we take seriously. And I think that is more effective to have the citywide 20 mile per hour versus kind of spot treatments.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. I want to take this second here to ask James and Brett. I'm not sure what capacity they have for raising their hands, but if they have any questions or comments.
Hi, this is Britt. I do have a comment. First of all, I think this is great, and I think it will help a lot if we can get this to happen. I agree about it should be citywide to set that tone. And I just want to include that I think it would be nice if the discussion included some design considerations of, you mentioned the trucks going through, not following the truck route. And I think that happens with personal vehicles too, especially during times of detour. But people cutting through the neighborhood when they should be on the main drag. And I think we need to do more to make that harder for them. A lower speed limit would certainly make it harder for people to cut through neighborhoods. But I think the best example of this is 4th between Orange and Russell, and what a difference it would make if there was a fire gate or something halfway across there so that it wasn't a through route for people. And then it would be a much safer greenway. So I think that should be considered alongside of this is to actually protect those routes by physically preventing cross through in neighborhoods that don't need to be crossed, so that it's, maybe one way in, one way out kind of thing, like they did near Russell and Brooks, where there's some places that you can't turn a vehicle right or left or whatever. And those things really help, I think, on the small residential roads to just, if somebody doesn't need to be there, then they don't need to be there.
Hey, Britt, great comment. You're anticipating another presentation that will come forward in a month or two. We're working on kind of revising our traffic calming program, calling it a neighborhood traffic management program that will have kind of a flow chart, a workflow, and give the city some more options in addressing how we manage traffic within our neighborhoods. So, and do so in an equitable manner, kind of neighborhood wide, and not just be catering to the neighborhoods that are loudest and have the most resources.
Yeah, and I think that the fire gate in particular is an underused thing. I don't know if I've ever seen one in Missoula, but I grew up on a street with a fire gate, and so if anybody needed to get through, they could get through, but no one ever did, and it was the safest place in the world. And the people that wanted to drive fast took out the fire gate one year, and then the road was no longer walkable and bikeable at all. And so I think just something as simple as that, people will take a shortcut if you provide it to them. That's my comment. Thank you, guys.
All right, thanks, Brett. James, do you have anything?
Hi, this is James. I would just like to say that the Lewis Clark neighborhood leadership team would be excited to hear about some speed limit revisions and some code changes around this. And I think they would particularly be interested in reviewing the school zones in the neighborhoods between Rose Park and Lewis and Clark, and making sure that's part of this code revision. That's all I have to input. Thanks.
All right, thank you, James. I noticed Ryan's had his hand up for a bit. Go ahead, Ryan.
Hi. Yeah, I just was gonna tag on to what Britt said about 4th Street, because I actually live in that that's part of 4th Street, and between Orange and Russell. And I will just say that I personally think that 99% of the reason why it's better than it used to be is because of all the roundabouts. And I will say that my neighbor has lived here for 40 years, and when I first moved here, he told me that before they saw the roundabouts, cars would regularly drive through there going 60 miles an hour to avoid the other streets, and they were annoyed. As soon as they installed the roundabouts, no car even has the physical capability of going through there like that anymore. Some people drive a little bit too fast around the roundabouts, but the roundabouts do an amazingly good job of keeping the speeds down. So I'll just say that anecdotally as the experience on one of our neighborhood greenways. So there you go.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I do have a question. Is there a particular area of town you guys looked at to see, or is it just kind of a, you coming to us like, should we do greenways or should we do, I mean, what has been looked at so far?
So historically, the way that we've done speed reductions in town, and we have done a few, have been in school zones, because that's how state law explicitly allows cities to set speed limits, is within school zones. And so we look at, we do an engineering study that looks at the, the existing speeds. Madison talked about the 85th percentile. While we've moved a little bit beyond that, we still rely pretty heavily on how fast people are traveling. Maybe the most recent corridor speed study and speed reduction we did was on Mullen Road. That wasn't a school zone, was on Mullen Road following a pedestrian fatality there. And a speed study was done, or a safety study was done, that showed that that street could be reduced to 35 miles an hour without too negatively impacting traffic. And so that was, council did that following a fatality. Other reductions we recently did on Russell, in the area of Russell School. There's a temporary schools slow zone when school's in session, advertised by flashing bouncing balls, we call them, the flashing yellow lights. We've done Higgins near Paxson. We've done Reserve. Other schools have just had always had for, or at least as long as we can remember, had a lower speed in front of them. And some others don't. And so it's really kind of hit and miss. A recent one we also did was near DeSmet School, out at the intersection of Expressway and Butler Creek. We reduced the speed along Expressway in front of the school there. So we do currently do them, but really only where state law allows. This kind of, even considering greenways and figuring out how to do that would require some work with the attorney's office and figuring out how we would recommend changing code. And then a citywide speed reduction, while being embraced in a lot of places. Again, it's currently, it's arguably not allowed for us to do. And so we would have to be creative in how we went about doing that.
So doing a blanket citywide one wouldn't be an option.
Well, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know exactly, but there are there's language in the state law that says that all speeds in an urban district are 25 miles an hour, unless otherwise posted. And then a different section of the law gives cities the ability to request speed limit changes on MDT's roads near schools and senior centers. And so it kind of leaves out what happens on city streets, other than that initial blanket one that says that all speed limits within an urban district are 25 miles an hour. But they don't lay out state law doesn't lay out a formal process for how to change a speed limit on a street that is not near a school and is not owned by MDT.
Okay.
So that's what we need to work through, is what, would we need to change state law? Would we be able to use the justification that we don't meet our sight triangles at our intersections around town to be safely 25? Can we use that as a way to say that we should reduce the speed limit so that more intersections can meet the sight triangles? Because we don't have the authority, or we don't have the resources to, nor the desire to stop all of those intersections that are currently uncontrolled. Because that would be another way that you could reduce, your sight triangle reduces significantly if one of the legs is stop controlled, because you're expecting that that direction is going to stop.
Okay. Gene, you had a question, comment?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, on the fire gate thing, if it's what I'm thinking about, I know that there's one on Hickory coming down that hill as you get towards the Milwaukee Road route, and I think it was for stopping through traffic during the ball games and such. I don't know, but I've never seen it really closed off. It's right there by the Natural History Museum, etc. So there's that, and I guess what I'm wondering is what Britt was mentioning. I think, as I understand it, it would basically turn certain streets like 4th into a cul-de-sac, or, well, not so much that, but that you'd have to approach your residence on 4th from 3rd or 5th from a cross street to access your apartment or home. So I'm not exactly sure how. I can see obviously how it cuts down traffic, but I'm not sure how it's if that's how it's meant to work. So that was one question, and Ben probably knows. And then secondly, going with the 20 mile an hour on residential streets, or if we end up with a recommendation to start out just with bikeways, which might let us get past the state law mix-up a little bit easier. The one thing that does, especially with the advent of e-bikes, is I think more people who ride are going to be a little bit more comfortable when the speeds slow down of moving out into the traffic lane, where they tend to get away from the habit that I still see quite a bit, where they ride close to parked cars, too close to parked cars. And I know those kind of dooring crashes are few and far between, but it's still a hazard. And if we have slower speeds, I think cyclists will be a little bit more comfortable on these residential streets of moving on away from parked vehicles.
Okay, Gene, thanks.
I want to answer the diverters question. So diverters are a tool in the toolkit, whether it be not allowing, making them right in, right out, or not allowing right turns in and only allowing the road to be an outbound, from the neighborhood, or having kind of a diagonal across a street so that you couldn't get through. Think of it kind of like Grant Street in the Franklin of the Fort neighborhood already has natural diverters with the irrigation ditches, and that's one of our ideal neighborhood greenway routes, because you don't have through movement for vehicle traffic. Everyone can still access their home just fine on that street, but you can cut through as a bicyclist or pedestrian, and you don't have to worry about cut through volumes, cut through traffic. It's certainly not something that would go everywhere, but it's definitely one of the tools in the toolkit that we're looking at with the neighborhood traffic management program.
So what would you need from us to help you?
Today is just information. We're letting you know where we're at, because we're going to be presumably going to a council meeting before the next bike ped board meeting, providing them a similar update. And then we expect to come back to the bike ped board seeking a recommendation in the future, once we get closer to wanting to bring something to for council to make a decision on. But today was just informational, just sharing the research that we've done, and kind of talking through the ways that we've been thinking about it, about these issues and how we might get to solutions. I think that your questions and comments have all been really helpful, and gives us a lot. We heard multiple requests to coordinate with police. That's something that we want to do. We've heard some confusion about the law, which we're already working with the attorney's office on. But we also heard overall enthusiasm and strong support for the benefits of reducing speed and speed limits, and trying to do that in a way that in combination with kind of physical elements that actually will help people adhere to a new speed limit if one is set. We also heard, I think, that this board favors an approach, a citywide approach on our local streets, but that you'd be open to maybe a greenways approach first if that was somehow more politically or legally feasible. Did I summarize board comment adequately? Did anyone majorly disagree with that?
Sounded good to me. Gene, you had something?
There I am. Yeah, Ben, in terms of the kind of strange language on the state regulation regarding non-state owned streets, residential areas more specifically, how does the connection between Missoula cities, towns with the state, how does that compare to what happened in Oregon and Colorado regarding, I want to say Fort Collins. It wasn't Fort Collins in Colorado, somewhere else. Boulder. And Boulder and Portland. So did that exist in Oregon and Colorado? Maybe it didn't, but if it did, how did they get around it? I guess would be my question.
I don't know the specifics of their state law. I do know that states vary pretty widely in how they authorize local jurisdictions to set speed limits. The final kind of gray area piece that I wanted to mention in the state law is that it says that to reduce speed limits, you need a speed study, but it doesn't, some states mandate that it's only an 85th percentile speed study. Ours just says that you need to do, have a professional engineering firm do a study for you and make recommendations. And so again, there's some flexibility with what that means. There are other states. I talked to an engineer working for the city of Asheville, North Carolina. In North Carolina, their state law says that the default speed limit is 35, not 25. And they say that you need an engineering study to do it. And so the city engineer there just has started declaring streets with lower speed limits that he thinks deserve it in his engineering judgment. That's his study, as he's doing that. So I think that there's some flexibility there, again, because there's ambiguity built into the state law. And so we just need to kind of work with the attorney's office to figure out what they're comfortable doing and what does that do for police and what does that do for us legally?
Hi, this is Britt. I have a quick comment. I just double checked, and according to the CDC, automobile accidents are the leading cause of death in America for teenagers. So keep that in your literature.
All right, good. Thanks, Brett. Sorry. Is there anybody else have anything they want to ask either Ben or Madison about slow streets or slower speeds? Thanks for coming and doing this for us, Madison, and bringing us this information. We look forward to taking it up at whenever the next meeting comes, you guys will be seeking recommendation from us.
Of course, thank you. Actually, can I just say one thing? I want to respond to something that Gene said.
Sure.
Yeah, so you asked what, Portland and Boulder are doing. Oregon specifically in its Senate bill enables local jurisdictions to set 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. And that's something else that we've run into in this, is not only that there's some ambiguity regarding the types of streets, but there's also a lot of ambiguity regarding the authority of local jurisdiction. And so that was just, one thing I wanted to be very clear about too, as Ben was talking, that, it varies so much what everybody's allowed to do in regards to the speed limits that are included and how they are permitted, regarding city council approval or an engineering study. But we are also running into some trouble in Montana, kind of seeing exactly where the city's authority comes in when it pertains to the roads.
Okay. Did that help? Did that help, Gene?
I'm not sure. I mean, I expect that people operating at the state level, kind of like more people in power like to keep their power. And the idea of saying, well, you need an engineering study, again, that depends on, what engineer you have. Obviously, you can't just say, I studied it and I think we should do it. It's kind of a strange thing. And then the question becomes, if there's some type of a study by independent organization that's being done, obviously there's a cost to that. And does that study need to, if we're looking at residential streets overall, does that study need to, obviously, I would hope doesn't need to be done on every single street, that hopefully we could take a sampling of some typical residential streets and go with that. And so it looks like Ben's nodding his head a little bit there. So, but that's pretty much what I got on that.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, I want to thank you for your time, Madison, and your work and coming to see us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, who do you have doing the safety and education inventory, Ben?
That's me. Margaret's here from Missoula in Motion to help answer any questions about their kind of current programming that I might not be able to answer. And that last discussion was really good, but it took quite a bit of time. So I'd like to try and keep this as brief as possible while also covering as much information as I can. So I'm going to share my screen. Are you seeing the presentation, Bicycle Safety and Education?
Yep.
Okay. So how do I actually make it do the slideshow?
Click on present or the arrow next to it will give you presenter mode.
Where are you seeing that? I feel like such
Next to share.
There we go. Okay, thanks, Madison.
Thank you.
So I wanted to provide an inventory of city and local resources around our bicycling safety and education that we perform as a city, and then other resources that we know about in the community. This is at Gene and other board members' requests to kind of learn more about what we are currently doing. So we have a variety of videos that we show. We run radio ads multiple times a year around different subjects. We have a handful of handouts that we try and distribute under normal circumstances as much as possible. There are a few curricula that are being taught in places, most notably Journeys from Home is a program that was developed in the Bitterroot by a longtime cycling advocate and educator, Roger DeBrito. I tried to include a link to their website. I forgot that there's probably a paywall and password there. I do have a DVD copy if any board member wants to borrow it and see what it is, but it's a K-8 progressive curriculum that is taught in schools. I've purchased a copy of the curriculum, 2 copies of the curriculum for MCPS to have. It goes along with their bike trailers that they check out, the gym teachers check out and teach a couple weeks of on-bike education in the school system. And then our in-person education efforts through most notably the Bike Ambassadors program, but also in walk-ins to our office through the pre-release and any events that we do like Bike Valet and places like that. I wanted to break out how we talk about these things by the issues rather than the specific items. I want to kind of tie what items address each issue and how we try and reach the most amount of people that we kind of can. And so I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail, but these are the big ones for us: riding with traffic, obeying signs and signals, yielding to pedestrians, using hand signals, using lights at night, road position, making left turns, and sidewalk riding. Those are some of the those are the behaviors that we want to encourage or provide more information on for people who might not know what options they have available to them. So riding with traffic, we are trying to address this probably most visibly with our salmoning video, which hopefully everyone watched the videos on the link on the city's webpage. Just on the city's webpage alone, it has over 4,000 views, but we've also posted it on social media, and I believe even ran it as ads on TV before, so we don't know the exact number. An older video that was made by my predecessor called What's Wrong. There's a whole series of them, but one of those addresses wrong way riding, and it has over 3,200 views. It's kind of our first rule of the road that we talk about when talking with people, and it's included as such on our bike maps, on the tips on our bike maps, in the League Smart Cycling Guide, and in the Bike Walk Montana Pocket Guide. Another yielding to pedestrians is also, oh, I skipped one, excuse me. Obeying signs and signals is another big kind of top 5 for us that we want everyone to do. And so the law says that bicyclists have all the rights and responsibilities as drivers. And so as such, they're expected to follow all signs and signals. The What's Wrong video number 4 addresses that. This is one that we've run specific radio ads about in the past. And again, is included in all of the handouts that we do. And it's a question that we field both from motorists and from bicyclists is, do I really have to stop at that stop sign, and what does a stop mean? And so we get to have good conversations with people about that. And it does not mean that you need to put your foot down. It just means that you need to be reasonably stopped, the same as you do in a motor vehicle. The next issue, yielding to pedestrians. We have a series of videos called Don't Be a Rick, where a guy named Rick engages in some reckless behavior. One of them takes place on the trail system, and so Rick is buzzing people without announcing that he's passing, and so his riding partner gently corrects him that, hey, you got to give people more space, and you have to let them know that you're passing. What's Wrong video number 6 also addresses that. It's on handouts. We've done radio ads about it. We, again, try and tell people in person. We've even give out branded bike bells. Missoula in Motion has done that through some of their personalized trip planning programming. Parks and Rec messaging has been big on this because trail riding or trails are kind of the place where we hear about the most conflicts. It does happen on sidewalks, and it is a law that you have to yield to pedestrians on sidewalks, but it's not as frequent a complaint that we hear about. Using hand signals is another one, another issue, and kind of one of our top 5. Law does give you an out if you feel that you can't control your bike, if you're on a hill or something like that. You don't have to use your hand signals. Other than that, though, you do. And so What's Wrong video number 1 addresses that. Again, radio ads, handouts, in person, something that when we've worked with camps before, the ambassadors, we have a bunch of handlebars that we made out of irrigation pipe, and we just have the kids, even if they don't have bikes, they just run around with their hands on the handlebars and practice just doing their turn signals as they're running around in a field. And so they're learning their lefts and rights, and it's something that we try and teach early. Using lights at night is state law. It's also really important. We have a Don't Be a Rick video about this. We also give out a couple thousand sets of bike lights every year. We participate in the Parade of Lights through downtown with having a group of bicyclists that are well illuminated and giving out lights and presenting on the importance of it. We partner with the police department so that their officers have light sets to give out to people who aren't wearing them. And again, we run radio ads and have the requirement on our map and any of the tip sheets, any of the handouts that we give out. Road position is kind of tied to predictability. That's one of our big messaging points, especially with the ambassadors who get to have longer form conversations with people about riding in a straight line, avoiding the door zone, not hugging the curb, but kind of staking claim to the lane when it's possible, or when there is not a bike facility present, or if for some reason you need to be in the lane, whether making a left turn or there's hazards on the right side, you can just be in the lane. So that's a piece that we don't quite have specific videos about. Some of the what's wrong talk about, one of the what's wrong videos shows someone swerving in and out of parked cars and it explains that. But it's one that really we try and have conversations with people, ambassadors do, but it's not one that we've done a major campaign around specifically. Another element of road position is passing on the left. This is something that, again, we talk about when we get to actually interact with bicyclists and talk about that we don't expect, motorists don't expect bicyclists to pass them on the right, and so then they might not see you if you do so. That being said, our bike lanes are typically on the right side of motor vehicles, even if they're turning. And so we also encourage drivers to look over their right shoulder. And that's part of the driver's ed videos that we have and what we teach new drivers that way. Another element of road position is how to address obstacles, trying to hit railroad tracks on a 90, avoiding sewer grates. On the city side, we're doing things like we've changed our sewer grate style to not have vertical long gaps to suck bike tires. And so, but really just watching out for hazards in the road. Making left turns, again, we don't have any specific information about this, and maybe it's worth making a video or something, but there's at least 2 ways to make a left turn. You can signal, get out in the lane and turn left, or you could ride through the intersection and then line up either in the bike lane or travel lane to cut across when it's your turn to go, or get off and walk in the crosswalk. Sidewalk riding is the next one, and this is it's something that is not illegal. We're a little bit actually conflicted in our messaging about this. It's not illegal at the state level, and it's something that we discourage. We talk especially with our pre-release residents about this, but it's that if someone must ride on the sidewalk or feels like they want to, we just strongly encourage making eye contact. But again, we don't have, this is not a point that is something that we've done a lot of specific campaigning around. And that's kind of what we do. Again, we probably run a couple hundred radio spots a year. We have Facebook videos. We occasionally promote the handouts, the League of American Bicyclists. I believe we've given out about 500 of them in the last year and a half. This year, of course, has been really slow. We give out the bike maps that have the tips. We give out about 2,000 of those every year. And so there are certainly gaps. We're not reaching everyone. We're not even sure anymore of how much the schools are incorporating the Journeys from Home program. We don't have hard data on the driver's ed, how many people are watching the video at driver's ed that's about intersections and interacting with bicyclists and pedestrians. And so, but we do know that the driver's exam has 4 questions on every exam related to biking from a pool of 10 that I helped write about 8 years ago or so. There's kind of real limit to the amount of educational resources that we have and that we engage in, because our plates are so full doing a lot of other things, and because the research shows that the biggest increase in safety is more people biking. This chart shows that as countries have higher numbers of bicyclists, and that people make more trips per capita by bicycle, that the amount of bicyclists that are killed goes way down. Or in our case, the other way, we have fewer people on bikes and the deaths are higher. And then another study was done that actually broke this down to density along certain corridors. And so safety really increases when you hit enough people biking through an intersection or along a corridor that it becomes driver expectation to see people there, regardless of the type of infrastructure and regardless of other things such as safety campaigns or things like that. So I know that Gene's request in the past has been for us to develop some sort of online tool related to safety. And quite frankly, it hasn't been in our work plan. And there are seemingly great courses out there, the League's Cycling 101, Cycle Savvy, and we struggle getting people to want to attend things like that or be able to pay for them. Bike Walk Montana has actually tried to get people to become league certified cycling instructors, and we can't even get the 8 people required for a classroom across the entire state in one place for one weekend to be able to take that class and keep their LCI status up. So I've taken the first class. I haven't done the second one, so I'm not technically an LCI league certified instructor. I've done this the Cycling Savvy classes, and so it's something that there's kind of a major gap in Missoula and in Montana as a whole over how we're providing education, but it's currently being filled as best as possible, seemingly through advocacy communities, through school systems, bike rodeos, things like that. But there's definitely more that could be done.
This is Britt. I just want to say I recognize your limitations and the priorities and how what you do might actually impact safety more than education. I just wanted to add something for Gene. Free Cycles is not doing a lot of classes right now because of the pandemic, but they have been hosting weekly classes for a long time. So there are resources out there that are free too.
Go ahead, Gene. Gene, you can go ahead.
Yeah. This was before the pandemic or right around, and I've talked to Bob and asked him about the classes. And so I stopped in for one. There wasn't one that I don't think Bob himself was doing. In any case, and this is nothing really against Bob, because I found that particular class was about 80% orientation as to what happens at Free Cycles, how you go about putting in time to get your free bike, a number of different things, how to use the shop, etc. The content as far as safe bike lane covered just a couple things that Ben had on the list about riding with traffic and crossing railroads and a few things like that. So I found that although the intention I think was good, that the content, was skimpy compared to. I used the best example I've come across that I saw on the list that Ben put out was the new League of American Bicycling street guide, I think it's called. And that's pretty good in terms of avoiding some common hazards, the right hook, the people pulling out of driveways and alleys. Again, and this has just been my experience over the last couple dozen years for sure. I find, and I would suggest that the members, and I know Ben's done this, is gone to the ABEA, which stands for American Bicycle Education Association, but just the letters ABEA.bike. And that really is good in pointing out the advantages of, rather than the one diagram Ben had up showing stop signs, had the bicycle and the car together in the same lane at a stop sign, and that's very typical, and it usually works out very well. But one of the things that happens when you have a bicyclist, let's say on a 11-foot lane, and let's not even consider parked cars, on an 11-foot lane, and they ride to the right, and another vehicle, because maybe it's not a giant truck or whatever, says they're going to share that same lane. Two vehicles basically side by side, you create what is really a two-lane street, one each direction, into a 4-lane street, where there's a bicycle essentially creates its own travel lane on the right, and the vehicle on the left side of that same lane creates in their mind their own travel lane as well. And that's what creates a lot of the right hook and left cross intersection problems. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is I think if people would start, I would suggest looking at the abea.org, not .org, abea.bike, BIKE site. There's some very good insights into how bicyclists who continue with the standard of stay far to the right end up creating problems for themselves, situations that, if not hazardous, prove frustrating for them, and therefore can lead them into thinking that, this whole bicycling commuting thing on local streets is not a good deal, and therefore, unless they have a bike lane, that they're not going to travel there. Whereas the way I do it, and again, it's just part of my life experience, that by the term is used as controlling the lane, being out in the middle of a lane that's basically less than 13 feet wide, because a typical vehicle can't pass me without at least in part leaving the lane. That allows me to control how other vehicles interact with me, rather than other vehicles, motor vehicles, feeling that they have free rein to zip by me, often less than 3 feet away, within the same lane. So I just wanted to, I'm talking too much, I'm sorry. I just wanted to put that consideration out for other members on the board, is to look into some of these things. And I'll finish up with one thing. I know Missoula in Motion, again, I don't know what the staff time and the budget is in terms of, and I mentioned this in a little email to Ben, we had little perks, the little monthly things. If you commute so many times, you can get free coffee or a slice of pizza or whatever, and you do that, and that's an encouragement. And part of what I was envisioning is, if we had a consistent specific site, a little Missoula Bike School, a webinar, if you will, that people could go to, and when they click on it and they go through it and they take a couple of questions, half a dozen or 16 questions at the end based on what they saw in the presentation, and they click on that I read this, it's an auto system. It would work the same way, in that they could say, hey, I took your little 25-minute course. I got a lot of information on it, and now I know the best way to ride. And then they could also get on the list for their free coffee or slice of pizza. So that's kind of what I'm trying to look at, is taking the Missoula in Motion encouragement model and taking that and essentially inserting a bicycle education webinar of sorts to into that same modality, if you will.
All right, Jane, thank you. Jesse?
Hi, I appreciate the presentation and all of the graphics. That took a lot of time and I think that was well done. I just had a couple of thoughts. One is we could use the buses, the bus side ads. It's like mobile education. I love radio spots. I actually, I hear things, but not everybody listens to radio anymore and the buses are always going by. And so I've seen that used effectively for sort of public service campaigns in the past. I don't know how much it costs, what the budget is. It might not be possible, but I actually like the idea of that Jean had about the people who could be sort of like bike champions if they go through an educational component. But what I would say about that is that would be a perfect thing for children who want to have like the junior ranger program in a national park, but instead they could become a bike champion if they understand these basic biking principles. They get a certificate that they're a bike champion as part of the PE thing or something like that. That would be different than watching the videos for journeys, which I'd never seen and sound cool, but I'm not sure about that one. Otherwise, my only comment was just that in looking at the infographics, I kind of pretend like I'm a little bit of a graphic designer. I like designing t-shirts and logos. I would say that the infographics that you, not in the PowerPoint, but just in the email or the attachment, as I scroll through them, they feel really busy. And so I like the New York City Bike DOT infographics. They're very, very simple. If you want to know more, if you want those very detailed drawings about right turns or left turns or whatever, you can certainly find it there too, but they have basically 3 main infographics that are super, super simple. And I think that it would be a nice rethinking. And again, I don't know if that's in the budget or if it's been a while and maybe the infographics can be revisited, but that would be my final thought on that before we talk about the board priorities.
Okay.
Sorry, I just want to address that. We've been talking for about a year now on updating the back of the bike map. I assume that's where you're talking about things being busy, Jesse. And so we've talked about that, and we just have been a little understaffed. It is on our radar as something to do, but Aaron's staff usually helps out with the bike map, and they've been understaffed and have a lot of projects going on. And Catherine has been out on maternity, and so we're 2 down in our already small office, and so we haven't done it yet. We typically do a print run in like late fall and early winter, and so it's something that we'll look at. Do we have the ability to do it this year, or it might have to wait until our next print run next year? But it's certainly been on our radar that, hey, this is a little busy and is not necessarily helping us, or not the best we can do.
And then also on this discussion is we have to remember that some of these ideas are requiring money. I mean, somebody's gonna there's at some point somewhere something's gonna be requiring money, and this board just doesn't have that at all. So we would have to go through like Missoula in Motion, Ben's office, and that kind of stuff. And we just need to, when we're coming up with our ideas, we really need to keep in mind our resources and how limited they are. Go ahead, Gene.
Yeah, on the last point, in terms of funding, like I said, I don't know, and I'm not trying to get in anybody's face about it. The budget and staff time for Missoula in Motion, how the priorities are established, and I guess part of the thing I'm thinking is, well, if we kind of had a sense of that, maybe we could see a way to make a recommendation in terms of, how big of a slice of the pie, if you will, should go towards developing this type of program as part of the auspices of Missoula in Motion or Development Services. The other thing is in terms of money to do these kinds of things, like I said, developing a webinar. And I like Jessica's idea of a certificate. I think that would be great to have a part of that, sort of like your little bicycle driver's license, if you will, saying, hey, you did a good job on checking out how to use your bike safely and respectfully as a vehicle. So I think, I don't know if it's through development services or someplace else. I think that there was like some mini grants for $1,000 or $2,000, $3,000 in grants. So that's maybe a potential for anybody on the board, including myself, working on this type of a thing. Jessica mentioned that she's a graphic designer by avocation or trade. I'm not sure which. So there's a resource for us there. One of the things I'm thinking of doing in my next Road Zen article that I do in the paper every month, I don't know how many of you people see it or not. I hope I have some readers. Is just putting a call out for people who have the computer skills to put together a virtual or online class, sort of in alignment with the type of stuff that's put out by League of American Bicycling. Have our own local version of that. Would say maybe get licensing instead of getting licensing from another source to use their materials, is sort of develop one of our own. If we could have some people who are volunteering their skills in computer animation and graphic arts, we could do one locally, and based on the information that's already out there, sort of make our own nice tight little local model of it. So again, the idea being, if we had something nice and tight and well done, however it's developed, we could have it out there instead of the different various sort of bundle and tighten up what we're doing now through the radio ads and don't be a Rick and did you know that, and what's wrong with this video. Again, I don't know how many people that are out there that bike know that these videos exist, or again, like was mentioned, how many people listen to the radio ads. So I know if I wasn't on the board, I really wouldn't be, as someone who's been biking a long time, I would never even think to look for any of these things. And I don't listen to the radio that much, very much anymore, except NPR. So I guess what I'm wondering is, even with the print materials, are those resources actually getting out to the people other than maybe the brand new bicyclists, which is not a bad thing. But I'm thinking of trying to broaden the spectrum a little bit in terms of the people that have been riding for 10, 20, 30 years, and sort of maybe have some outmoded ideas or kind of let their safe practices slide a little bit. I'm trying to think of trying to get, those people into the spectrum when we're reaching people that we want to get these good messages, best practices out to. And then again, that's why I'm saying, if we did something where we had a little bit of a perk added to them accessing whatever we put together in terms of a little webinar, that would be a way to kind of gather in people from a broader spectrum of people. I think they know stuff that maybe they don't know. They don't know what they don't know, those people. So I'll leave it go at that. Thanks, Corey.
All right, thank you, Dean.
You're absolutely right. That's the hardest group to reach. Even our bike ambassadors have real trouble talking to people that already think they know the best thing to do, that have been riding for a while. It's a very difficult population to engage with meaningfully or to change behavior with, which is one of the reasons why we focus our resources on lower hanging fruit, like new bicyclists, people who are new to town, people who are visiting and need a map, people at the pre-release who might be new to living in Missoula and are needing to ride a bicycle for transportation. We've even done direct outreach at the Pavarello and places where people are vulnerable and maybe had not been exposed to any formal bicycle education before. I do want to also say that MIM has come and done, Missoula Motion has come and done presentations on their work plan and priorities that have been set through kind of the MPO and best practices for what a travel demand management or a transportation options organization does, which are the kind of the two terms for what Missoula Motion does. it's something that safety education, while it's an important part of getting people to ride more, their mission is to reduce congestion and improve air quality through that congestion reduction. And so it's really trying to get more people riding. Now, I do agree that people might try it once, and if they have a bad experience because they weren't behaving the best they could, they might not stick with it. And so there's certainly value to providing some form of education, which is what we do. But I totally acknowledge that we are not reaching people who have been riding for a long time, whose behavior patterns are pretty well established and might not know what they're not knowing, as you put.
Yeah,
This is Britt. I'd like to chime in just a little, if that's okay, regarding, how the rest of us might feel about this prioritization of time, because you presented us data that showed that you were getting more bang for your buck by advocating for design changes and increasing in walking and biking. And, for example, I just think of the Riverfront Trail, which everybody says, oh, it's too crowded, people go too fast. Sorry, I was just biking. They don't ding their bells. And actually, that's not a problem of bicyclist behavior. That's actually a problem of the path not being wide enough. So I think we need to focus on those structural changes. Like if the Milwaukee Trail were 15 feet wide, I don't think we'd have any issues about bicycle education on it. So I would just say that I think our priorities might be better spent advocating for these structural changes and increase in ridership, and let the nonprofit organizations that do this. And I think, Jean, you might have found your calling for a nonprofit to volunteer for.
All right, thanks, Brett. Was that it?
That was it.
Okay. All right, if there aren't any other questions, Ben, do you have anything you want to give us in your report?
Yeah, I wanted to actually even just, the board is probably aware that Higgins Bridge is under construction. I believe it kicked off this week. And so for about the next year and a half, Higgins Bridge will be down to one travel lane in each direction and only one side of the sidewalk being open at any given time. The trails underneath are to remain open other than specific key closure times, which will be advertised in advance and be well signed. But one of the issues that we're running up against with MDT and with the contractors, that they want to keep the trails open by putting storage units, storage containers under the bridge for where the trail is. And it's Parks and Rec staff and in my opinion, that is not an adequate, that a storage container doesn't provide adequate width or adequate height clearance for people to say bike past each other or walk strollers past each other. And so I was asked by Parks to make the board aware that is being put forward right now as the current preference by MDT, and to see if board members would want to advise the city to, or advise that we do something different than storage units for the trailway.
I make a motion that we recommend that they not use storage units and they use whatever Ben and the Parks and Rec folks think is safe and allows adequate passage.
What are the alternatives, Ben? What else is being looked at?
Well, when they did the Madison Street Bridge, they, I believe they had they constructed just a wooden structure over the pathway. So you maintained the full width of the trail. A storage unit is only about 7.5 feet wide on the inside, whereas our paved trails are 10 feet wide.
Okay.
Yeah, there's probably netting options to catch any debris. There's probably other ways of doing it.
So, okay. So then we have a motion to recommend that the storage containers not be used. And maybe I would add to that encourage them to seek better, safer, just find better alternatives than that. So anyway, so that's the motion, not to discourage the use of storage containers and encourage finding a different solution, a better solution. Is there any discussion on that?
Point of order, I don't know that we can vote on that without public notice.
That's probably true. I wasn't quite looking for a motion, just a general like discussion and agreement from the board that this is important or not.
Well, I fully agree with that, but I think a larger concern is you said there was only one sidewalk open right now, or are we really putting bi-directional foot traffic on a 4-foot sidewalk?
We are.
I don't think that's acceptable. And is there a bike lane?
No.
Neither of those things should be acceptable.
There's really no other room. They're doing half the bridge at a time. The good side is that they're doing the west side first, and so they'll have the widest sidewalk and bike lane done first. And so when we head in, hopefully by next summer even, and so when we head into the nicer weather next year, there will be a much better facility available.
Okay, so there's a procedural question here in front of us, and I wasn't aware that we had to have every motion noticed.
I'm pretty sure that we do, that official motions need to be publicly noticed.
Okay. Well, then I guess my other option, would either be ask Jessica to withdraw her motion or move that it be tabled.
Okay, I withdraw the motion and instead we'll make a recommendation that we don't want the storage containers and instead we would like a safer alternative.
Can you use that, Ben?
That's helpful. I guess I want to hear from anyone if they either disagree or feel strongly about it. I heard that Jesse and Britt feel strongly about it.
Okay, Gene?
Yeah, what I'm understanding, what I thought I understood from Jessica is, I don't know if it's so much not having the storage containers or not having them in a place that requires closing off the pathways. I think it's more a matter of saying, let's keep any storage containers or any other construction materials in places where it's not going to be interfering with the flow of
Gene, they
bikes on the
plan
trails.
on using a storage container as the pathway, as a tunnel for the pathway. So the door is open on both ends and you go through it.
Okay.
That's
But
their
no way, Jose.
That's their
I feel
proposal.
very strongly about that.
Yeah.
Hey, Ben, if I might jump in just with a recommendation for board members or anyone who has concerns about this project, that MDT is holding weekly update meetings on Wednesdays. And I believe those are open to the public. You can join that via Zoom call. And so if there are, Britt, I think that would be a really good place since this is MDT's project and they have much more control over it than we do. That would be a good place to advocate for, one, improved protection on the trails, and two, get concerns related to the sidewalk and street and lane closures more directly addressed by MDT.
Yes, thank you for that. I'll email you if I can't find the link for it.
I will send it out to the board here in a moment.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Okay, is there sorry, can't even talk today. Is there any loose ends on this subject? We'll just have everybody, if you're interested in commenting, click on the link that Aaron provides and you can make your comments there. It does sound like, Ben, that there's a pretty heavy, we don't like this idea coming from the board. So you can go, take that away with you from this. Okay, and so is there anything else on your report, Ben?
No, that was kind of the big one. I'm sure there's other things that we're working on, but in the interest of time, I'll move on.
Okay. The next item that we have is we're supposed to have been starting our annual priorities discussions, and different things keep getting kind of pushing it to the side. But I don't know how much time we have, like 10 minutes left to get into it. One of the things that I do want to make sure that we address before we adjourn is to talk about setting our calendar. It's something we do every October. I mean, it's just affirms that we're meeting from 3 to 5 p.m. on the first Tuesdays of the month, and it just kind of lists out a calendar of what dates those Tuesdays are. Historically, since I've been on the board, I always try to push for the November meeting to be pushed to the second week of November, of course, because of Election Day. So I just wanted to, I guess I will move that we keep the schedule, the board meetings as scheduled, and with the exception of the November meeting being pushed to the second week of November.
Corey, I'm just going through the calendar. It looks, oh, never mind. It's a Tuesday. I was going to say Tuesday in September is going to be after Labor Day, but that's okay.
Okay. All right. And all right. And I think I just moved that. So anybody opposed? No? Then we will go ahead.
Corey, just right now on the agenda, it's saying our next meeting is on Election Day. So are we moving that back to the 10th?
If we go ahead and approve this right now, yeah, then we'll move it to the 10th.
Okay.
So, so any other discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will keep the calendar as we have it previously scheduled, with first Tuesdays of every month, with the exception being on November, which will be on the second Tuesday of November. The other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about, and we've talked about as well, is since we are more online right now, if the board wants to entertain the idea of moving the times, and possibly even the days, but right now just the times. I don't want a decision right now or a motion right now, but just kind of think about, do we want to take advantage of using this format to maybe change at least the times of when we meet, to where it'd be easier or something like that on other members. Like I said, past boards have been open to it, but we just ended up not, because of physical constraints with meeting spaces and MCAT resources. So I guess I just wanted to put that out there, keep have everybody think about that, and we'll maybe talk about it in November.
Corey, one of the things that while we are a little bit freed doing these virtual meetings, we're still tied to needing the MCAT equipment and admin staff time to help be the hosts and do all of that conversion to the live YouTube and recording the meeting for minutes and that sort of thing. So it's totally up for discussion. I'm not saying no, but we can't just meet Thursdays at 10 p.m. or something, Right.
I understand. Okay. I guess we can table the rest of the the priorities discussion to the next meeting, considering we have 7 minutes left. I do want to ask you, Jesse, though, do you still have that list that you sent that link to me on Google Documents for, that had all everything that you had written down?
Yep, I just added the setting the calendar to it for October, so we're all done there.
Okay.
So this would be tabled, and then in November, will it be number 1 on the agenda?
It probably will be number 1 on the old business portion of the agenda. But I just wanted to ask you if you will make that available to the rest of the board. I don't know if you have already or not, but if you would.
So I'm kind of, I felt scared when I joined the board because you told me that because of public meeting transparency and requirements, I wasn't supposed to email directly with any other board members. And so I have never responded to any of your emails because I felt like I was violating the law. And so I only sent it to you two because I was an agenda item at the time that I was trying to get on the agenda. And so, yeah, I felt like I couldn't do it, but if I can do it and you guys want me to do it, then sure.
Send stuff to me and I'll forward to all board members, Jesse, and you can always reply. You can always have individual conversations. It's where you can't just reply all to board members and have discussion that could be construed as discussion that should happen at the meeting.
I mean, I think you can limit access to it so that that nobody else can add anything or discuss it. As long as there's no discussion, you're fine.
So just to be clear, I could reply all and send just the chart. And then as long as no one talks about the chart, we're good.
You should send me the chart and then I'll distribute to the board and ask board members if they have any additions. And then people will respond individually to me and Corey, and we will put the additions together and then distribute the kind of finalized chart closer to the meeting.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for doing that, Jesse. That's going to be very helpful. All right, if there is nothing else, let's see. There's no new business. Does anybody have any announcements they need to make? Okay, seeing none. Our next meeting will be on, I have to look at my calendar, on November 10th at 3 o'clock here on Zoom. All right, thank you for everybody for your time, and you have a good rest of your week. Hopefully see you next month. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.